am going to go ahead and introduce our guest speakers who we're very lucky to have with us today, and then hand it over to them. So we have Heather Reider and John Adrian. So Heather is our Colorado Avian Health Program Manager up at CSU, or based out of CSU, and then John is our Colorado Avian Health Program Specialist. So a lot of you guys might know them in Adams County. They've been wonderful, and they come to our county fair and help with our vet checks and swab our poultry to make sure those animals coming in are healthy. So we're doing our biosecurity there. So we're very lucky to have them come down for a number of years. So we love working with them, and they are going to teach us a little bit today about everything from health to biosecurity and all that stuff. So Heather, John, I will pass it off to you guys, and feel free to do some plugs for yourselves and the avian program up there at CSU.
Great. So hopefully you guys can hear me okay. Let's see some thumbs up, right? We do this at school, right? All right, awesome. Yeah, well, we're super happy that we get to meet with you guys today. A lot of times we do this in person with the groups, or, you know, we're out there seeing you in the community, but obviously you guys are aware that things have been a little strange lately with COVID floating around. So now we get to do it all via this platform, but we're still happy. I get to see all your faces. We set it up in a way where I can see everyone out there. And right now we're actually at the diagnostic lab. So we are Colorado State University. I'm Heather Reider. I've been working for the Colorado State University Avian Health Program now for been managing it for probably about 5 or 6 years now. I kind of came from a wild bird background before this. And then kind of landed in poultry, and it's been just a great experience for me. I have a really neat job. I get to work with 4-H groups. I get to work with youth. I get to work in the diagnostic lab. So I'm actually out there sometimes setting tests. I get to go to farmers markets, backyard flocks, commercial flocks, and we get to help all sorts of people with their chicken issues. And I really like it because I get to work with the communities and like you guys who have chickens. And since I can kind of see some of your faces, raise your hands if you actually have chickens. How many people are wanting to get chickens that don't have them yet? Is there a couple out there? Couple, yeah, see, so you're kind of interested, you're thinking about it. So yeah, this is great. So we're gonna like try to touch on a bunch of stuff, and we're hopeful you guys will ask us some questions, and hopefully we can answer them. And if we can't, we'll definitely find the answer for you. As much as we think we know it all, there's always a question or two out there that stumps us. And so maybe someone else out there is an expert too that knows a little bit more about a topic than us. I'm gonna let John introduce himself because he's gonna get part of the presentation today.
Well, I'm John Adrian, and my background was more commercial for a long time. I graduated from CSU and several years ago, and then went into commercial poultry with Lewis Rich. Did a lot of turkeys. Then I went up to Washington State, did a hatchery where we had 60,000 chicks a day. Did some traveling in Canada with breeders, broiler breeders, and then back to California where I ran another hatchery, and we did some organic birds and kind of the first phases of that. So that's kind of my background.
Yeah, so we, as a poultry program, all these things are valuable, and so they're really important. So we try to have a diverse team that can kind of bring all that poultry knowledge together. And like I said, the cool thing about us, what I think is, the poultry program in Colorado is kind of run out of Colorado State University. So we get to be tied into the university and extension and all like the 4-H groups. And that's really good for us. We also are a diagnostic lab, like I said. So we actually run tests right over there. You probably can see my window. There's actually tests being performed over there right now. And like we're also in the field, kind of out at fairs and shows and doing all that fun stuff with you guys. And this is kind of what this slide was about. It's just more saying that, you know, we really are involved in a lot of different aspects of Colorado's poultry health. We work with the state vet. We work with, and I don't know, many of you maybe don't know the National Poultry Improvement Plan, but that's a national program that tries to prevent disease, you know, the spread of certain diseases through Colorado flocks. We try to do a lot of education outreach when we can and we have time. But like where you guys are going to see us again are going to be at shows, fairs, you know, and all those poultry events is probably where you're going to interface with us. Hopefully you never have to come visit us in the lab, because that means you have a sick bird, and that's very sad for us. But we're also a resource if you ever do have a sick flock and a bird and you kind of want to know what's going on. We got a lot of experts around here that can help us solve those problems with poultry. All right. So yeah, so today we're going to start the conversation. I'm going to talk to you guys about some kind of common illnesses and common things that we see kind of in poultry. And then John's going to speak next after that. And he's going to talk about biosecurity and how we kind of work to keep our birds safe. Because as most of you know, and those of you who own birds probably have experienced this, once your bird's sick, it's very difficult and it's very hard to get them better again, because chickens are very sensitive species. So really what we try to educate people on is prevention. So to try to prevent your birds from getting sick or getting an illness, and that's how you really can help your flock and your chickens. And so we're going to talk a lot, you're going to hear that word prevention a lot today. But we really believe that that's so critical to your poultry health, that all the stuff you can do on the front end is going to help your bird and your flock stay healthy. Because once your bird and your flock is sick, it's kind of a tough road and it's not always easy to overcome. So you could, whoops, let me go back. So you see these guys, they all look healthy, happy. This is what you want your chickens to look like, right? They're all out there in the field and they're in the sunshine and their feathers look really nice and they look actually almost happy, right? So, but sometimes this is what we actually get, right? You kind of see this group of birds down below, not looking so good, maybe some feather loss, looking pretty thin. And so like for when we're trying to like work with you guys out there, what we want you guys to do is actually we want you to know your birds. Because if you're not in there with your birds and you're not handling your birds and you're not in the coop daily, you're not going to know if someone gets sick, because you got to remember birds got a lot of feathers around them, right? And so that sometimes they look really healthy, but then you pick them up and you realize that they're really light and they've lost quite a bit of weight and muscle. And that's kind of one of the things that we look for when we want to know if our flock is doing well or not doing well, is kind of that muscle tone. But you can't know that unless you're picking up and handling your bird. So we always ask you guys to use your senses when you're in your coop, right? Look. You know, you always want to be looking at your birds and, you know, paying attention, kind of being good scientists and good stewards of your flock. You want to be listening. Are they making their normal crowing noises, or are you hearing like coughs and snickering like when you're sick or your brother or your sister is sick? Like something just doesn't sound right, or it sounds kind of gurgly and wet. Smells, that's a big one. Like your coop, if you guys are keeping it clean and you're out there changing your water and you got good feed going every day, like it should smell not horrible. It should just smell like chickens. But sometimes when you get other things like diarrhea and, you know, coccidiosis and some of the, you know, it can really start to stink and it doesn't smell right, right? So these are the kind of all the things like you guys are going to be detectives with your birds, because you want to detect it early before, you know, they get so sick and you don't know what's happening. So that's kind of what we talk about: picking up your birds, being out there with them in the coop, changing their water daily, kind of, you know, kind of knowing your flock. That's super important. See if I can change this. Okay. So sick birds don't always look sick. So here we are, like say come out and we're just standing there, and even us, we come to your farm, you know, we're looking in on your birds, we're looking in on your turkeys, and it looks like this and everything looks really great. We're like, yeah, no problem. You know, everything looks good. But if we get closer and we look up at these birds, we can actually see that something's wrong. But if, you know, sometimes you can't tell unless you're kind of in there and know the differences, what's happening with your bird. So this bird in particular has like some swollen kind of, this is a turkey. He's got some swollen cheeks. You can kind of see that there. You're probably seeing the nictitating membrane closed there. That's not a weird white eye, but it's all bubbly and kind of, you know, looks kind of like when you get sick and you kind of get a runny eye. Sometimes too, when birds kind of aren't feeling well and they're kind of coming down with something respiratory, the litter will stick to their face, like they, like, cause they're kind of, their nasal passages are kind of wet, and so the litter's sticking to their face. This guy also has a little bit of a swollen face. The other place we actually encourage you guys to look is in their mouths. Chickens, you know, like if they're getting sick and stuff, like you should know what a healthy chicken mouth looks like. But there are some diseases out there, like on this turkey, that you can see kind of some plaques and scarring and things that just aren't looking right. So you'll see us at fairs. When you come up to us and we're swabbing your birds, we're actually opening the mouth as we're swabbing and looking inside and just making sure we don't see anything abnormal going on in their, you know, around their throat there and kind of in their beak. And you were also listening too when we're like handling your birds, making sure we're not hearing any kind of wet breathing or coughing or kind of snickering, swollen faces, swollen eyes. This guy's pretty bad. He's pretty noticeable, like, but he just doesn't look good. So this happens to be, just so you guys know, I think you guys might be interested, but this is a super common respiratory disease in backyard flocks. This is Mycoplasma gallisepticum, and it's Mycoplasma, and well, you'll hear it called MG. This is a very, very common respiratory. We see it in chickens, we see it in turkeys. It's exceptionally bad in turkeys. Turkeys really don't feel good when they get this. It makes them feel gunky and not do well. Chickens can not feel well either. But the problem with mycoplasma is it is really common in backyard flocks, and the problem is you can't cure it. Once your flock has it, there's no getting better. And you can give it to, you know, your friends and stuff. So if you guys know that you have an illness like this is a time when you'd never want to bring your birds to shows, or you would kind of want to close your flock and not sell your birds to anybody, because we don't want to share this. We want to stop sharing these diseases because they're not nice and the birds don't feel good, and it kind of hurts, you know, our poultry community as a whole. So like when you guys are looking, you know, I mean, you guys have probably, hopefully you've never had a sick bird, but if you have, you'll notice that, you know, sometimes they're like fluffed up. Think about when you get sick, you kind of put your blanket around you and, you know, mom brings you, you know, some hot cocoa or some, you know, chicken noodle soup. Well, birds kind of do the same thing. They kind of hole up too, and they don't feel very good. They look a little fluffy and ruffled. You know, like I said, you're looking at their faces. If you guys are paying attention and you're in the coop every day, you're going to realize that maybe they're not drinking as much water and they're not eating as much food. Now, if you guys aren't taking good care of your birds and you're not out there every day, you may miss that they're not actually eating their food. If you talk to a commercial poultry operation, they're measuring that. They're actually got it down to a science. They're scientists, and they're out there measuring how much food and water their birds are eating. So they can tell too when something's not going right. Same for you in your backyard flock. You don't have to measure it, but you know how much your birds are eating because you're feeding and watering them every day. Again, we talked about respiratory signs like open mouth breathing, sneezing, swollen eyes, gunky eyes, you know, just not doing well. Lesions in the mouth, sometimes on the face, diarrhea. That's another one that they can get. They can get a runny stool. So if you're starting to see this in your flock, it's possible you have something infectious going on. So what do you do, right? Oh, there you go. Whoops, one too many. And I just want to touch a little bit more on some of the really common. So I'm also part of the Avian Health Hotline. So that means I'll share that number with you guys at the end. But if you guys have a sick bird and you don't know what to do, you can call me. You can actually call me and I'll talk to you, and I'll like kind of talk to you about kind of some of the options that we can do to test your bird. And anybody can call me. The whole, you know, we get calls all year long. It's depending on the time of season. Sometimes it's a veterinarian calling us because they got a bird and they want to make sure they're submitting the right test. Or sometimes I've just got an owner that has something going through their flock. Maybe they lost a few birds and they're really worried and they want to know how they kind of, you know, what they do to kind of figure out what's going on. So when it says hotline, you shouldn't be afraid of that. If you don't have to be in an emergency situation, it's just a call and kind of allow us to try to help you navigate and get you, like, whether, you know, recommend you go to a veterinarian, or maybe if you lost a bird, you could bring it here for necropsy. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. But these are common poultry diseases and illness that we see. I don't know how many, if I raise a hand, how many of you guys have heard of Marek's disease? So a few people kind of familiar with Marek's disease. Anybody experience Marek's in their flock? Hopefully not. Yeah, Marek's is no fun. Unfortunately, though, this is another disease that in the last 10 years has really kind of made a comeback, if you will, and that's not a good thing. And some of that has to do around backyard flocks and biosecurity and how they're selling and sharing birds. So as much as we love birds, there's a lot of risk that happens when we're not really careful when we know we have a sick flock. Marek's is just, simply put, it's a herpes virus that it causes like a cancer in chickens. Unfortunately, when a chicken gets it, most of the time they don't survive it. It causes paralysis. It can kind of present as blindness, and usually they don't thrive. Even if they do kind of survive it, they usually don't do well. Unfortunately, Marek's is so hardy. Like it's a very strong virus. You can carry it on your shoes from the show and bring it right home to your flock. Or if you go to a feed store and you go home and you don't change your shoes, you can just bring it right into your flock, because it's found on the feather dander. And herpes virus is just a very, it just survives in the environment really well. So anyway, so that's why when we talk later in our talk, we'll talk about biosecurity and how you guys protect yourself against Marek's. I already mentioned, I showed you some chicken pictures of mycoplasma, turkey pictures of mycoplasma. The two that we see is Gallisepticum and Synoviae. Gallisepticum tends to be the one that causes more the clinical signs of swollenness, but Synoviae can do the same, but it just tends to be less clinical. Once your birds have it, they're never getting rid of it. They can do some antibiotic treatments to try to knock back the symptoms, but it's never going to get out of your flock. Even if your bird's not showing symptom, this is a particular disease that your bird could still be shedding. So even though you're like, oh, but we were sick, we got diagnosed with mycoplasma, but now everybody looks healthy, I'm going to sell my bird. Unfortunately, that bird, even though he's looking good, your body can still put out the virus and then still get other birds sick. So we just ask, if you know you have some of these diseases in your flock, as sad as they are, we ask you, don't bring them to shows, don't sell them, try to close your flock and just kind of maintain your flock health, and just be careful when you're visiting other flocks. There's another infectious one going around, laryngotracheitis. This one can cause some mortality with it. Birds get very, very respiratory sick. Sometimes this is when we're talking about plaques in the mouth. We do see this in Colorado. We've actually had a number of cases here this fall. So it is out there. So if you're getting some respiratory stuff and you're getting some of your birds that might be dying, this might be something you'd want to test for. And obviously, you guys, probably being 4-Hers and working with chickens, know a lot about salmonella. I'm sure they've talked to you about it, but salmonella is considered a zoonotic disease. And what does that mean? Zoonotic means that we can actually get salmonella from the bird. These other diseases, we can't get Marek's, we can't get this mycoplasma, we can't get infectious laryngotracheitis, but we can get salmonella, we can get E. coli. These are the things that make our stomach hurt, can make us really sick, from not washing our hands or kissing our birds. And I know we love our birds. How many people kiss their birds? Let's be honest, right? Well, there's a risk with that, and I know it. They're cute and they're your friends and stuff, but unfortunately, the diseases that some of these birds carry can harm us. So you just should be aware of that you can get sick from your bird if you're not washing your hands, if you're kissing your birds. Maybe you could just practice petting them, and, maybe a hug, but maybe we keep our mouths away from our birds. It's hard to do, I understand. But, some of these diseases are really important and they can make us really sick. So when we come to a fair and we sit there, and how many of you guys have seen us at a fair? How many of you, raise your hands, have had us swab your birds, right? Yeah. So a lot of you have experience with us. We come in the green overalls, the green bibs, we come with a tube and a swab, and we get in the mouth, just like we do when you guys go to the doctor and you swab your mouth for like strep throat or something. We're doing the same thing to your bird. But what we're looking for in this case, we can test all the other diseases with that. Well, not Marek's, but all the respiratory diseases like ILT, mycoplasma, we could test with that swab. But what we actually are testing for when we come to the fair is avian influenza. That is our big scary disease that we are always worried about. Avian influenza, when birds get avian influenza, especially high path, which means super infectious, that's when thousands and thousands of birds can die. In 2015, there was a big break in the poultry industry. Avian influenza came in, and we lost a lot of birds up in the Midwest because of it. And this is the one that scares all of us, you know, as me as a working in the diagnostic lab, you know, John, when they work in commercial poultry, like this is the thing that all of us get real nervous about. And right now what we're seeing is over in Europe, this disease is popping up. It's popping up in a lot of different places. And so why we get nervous in the United States is when those migratory birds come back, they could bring it with them. So we want to protect our birds, like, because we love them and we want, you know, to have healthy birds. So when John starts to talk about biosecurity, this is the reason that's going to be so important. It's important for all the diseases, but it's just, you really want to protect your beloved flock, right? These are the birds that we're raising and we really care about. There are other ones like Newcastle disease and Salmonella pylori. So Newcastle, it's kind of a similar thing where it can cause some mortality. There was a recent break in California. We haven't seen it here in Colorado. We're not super worried about it right now, but we're always keeping an eye on it. We're doing some surveillance for it. And then if you're in the NPIP program, we're going to test you for a Salmonella pylori typhoid disease. Again, we haven't seen this in the United States. We've been so good with our disease testing that we haven't seen pylori in almost 30 years. So that's how effective that disease. And that's why we do what we do, because we're trying to keep the birds healthy. And I know sometimes it's kind of a pain to come to the fair and stand in those lines and then wait for us to like swab your birds. And, you know, you're anxious to kind of get going. But it really is important kind of what we're doing and making sure that we're not sharing disease amongst us, because we want to keep everybody healthy. So I kind of just already have talked about this. This is me at a fair, at a fair, looks like Boulder County maybe. And, you know, like I said, we can test for diseases through the swab. So I can test for a lot of respiratory diseases. When we're at the fair, we're testing for avian influenza, but I can test for Newcastle, mycoplasma, ILT, IBV, all those diseases that are respiratory in nature, I can test for on that swab. Serum blood, that we can test for certain diseases if we draw blood from a bird. So that's really important too. That's another way we can test for diseases. I don't know, necropsy is when a pathologist, when your bird dies and we kind of open it up to see what's going on. Necropsy is actually one of the best tools we have when you have a flock that has a lot of issues, when you lose a bird. It's the best tool we have for diagnosing what's going on in your flock. So sometimes it's kind of difficult to let your bird kind of go, but, you know, to us to do that. But when we can take a look at the inside of your bird and kind of see what's going on after it's passed away, like that helps us know, you know, what really could be going on with your flock. And it's a really important diagnostic tool that we have. So if you're ever having lots of birds that are dying, that's something you might want to consider. And we do that here at CSU. And then two, you're a veterinarian or a vet too, the assessment. I mean, all those pieces together is kind of how we put together what's going on in your flock. Because some diseases, you know, are very difficult to diagnose when the bird is alive, like Merrick's. The only way we can really diagnose Merrick's is through necropsy. Fortunately, there's not any other test out there to know. We have to look for certain lesions and stuff on the inside of the bird to know if it was Merrick's or a leukosis. So yeah. I already showed you some pictures, but I just always like to show them again. Just kind of different things. And again, this was kind of, you could see the first turkey that was mycoplasma. You can see how it's kind of got this other one's got some swollen joints. You know, those are other symptoms of mycoplasma. See this little rooster who's kind of looks like he's got kind of something in his mouth. That's ILT. Sometimes it forms a plaque. Now that's a pretty severe plaque. Sometimes it's not quite as noticeable as that. The other kind of barred bird there, you see it's kind of got the swollen face, could be a coryza, could be a mycoplasma. And you can just see they just don't look right. Like, right, the face is just like kind of swollen and not so good. They're not feeling well. So that's, I don't know if this is a good time to ask if we had any questions about infectious disease, but if not, I'm just going to move on to lice and mites, but I'm happy to kind of pause if there's any questions before I move through it.
We did have a good question from Becky. Becky's wondering if our birds have Merrick's or MG/MS, and we decide to cull the entire flock. And so for any of our kiddos that don't know what cull means, that means to euthanize or humanely kill animals. So if they decide to cull the entire flock, can we clean and disinfect the coop or run and start over with new birds in the same location, or do they need to build a new coop and run in a different location on the property?
Sure. Yeah, that is a super good question. There's no easy answer for it, but I will kind of give you some scenarios. So Merrick's, like I said, is found on feather dander. So you can imagine how much feathers are in a coop. So if you have been diagnosed with Merrick's, and you can kind of do a complete clean out, make sure all that feathers dander is now, some of this is going to depend on your coop. Like if you've got concrete floors and maybe your wood surfaces are painted, and you can easily like scrape out that litter and spray down the concrete surfaces underneath, and your coops are made out of wood that are painted so it's not porous and you can spray that down, you probably don't have to have as high of a fallow, like a downtime where you don't have any birds in there. And you know, there's never a guarantee, but like you're trying to reduce any risk. If they were kind of free range and out in the garden, you probably don't want to scrape that top dirt surface off anywhere where they kind of spend a lot of time, especially if you've got Merrick's. They sometimes recommend letting it sit through like a kind of either a winter or a really hot summer cycle. So sometimes like 6 months before you bring birds in. So you can do it, but sometimes it's going to depend on your coop setup. Now, if you've just got kind of dirt floors and you haven't painted your coop or it's just wood, it's really hard to disinfect those. So you're going to try to want to allow as much time as possible. And you're still going to want to try to clean. And you definitely want to get all that feather dander out there and try again. The tricky thing, mycoplasma is not quite as hardy. So you could kind of do all those efforts, but sometimes you don't need to let it sit as long, but it's still the same concept with cleaning and disinfecting, and even your equipment, like your boots, your gloves, your shovels, your rakes, anything that you use in your chicken coop, your feed, anything you put your water and your feed in. But even if you do all that work, there's no guarantee you're not going to just, if you're not buying from a good source that doesn't vaccinate for Merrick's, it's one of the few vaccines we recommend is getting birds that are vaccinated. If you're just buying birds on Craigslist, you're probably like high risk. You bring it right back in. You definitely want to like look at hatcheries that, test for these diseases and buy from a source that is disease free. Or a mycoplasma disease-free source. But if you're just kind of sourcing from backyard flocks or friends, you could easily bring that disease back in because it is so common in backyard flocks. But you can do it. You just got to be very carefully where you source your birds from.
Thank you.
Does that answer the question?
Perfect. I did actually have a follow-up question with Merrick, since you just mentioned that you can get a vaccine. I guess, is there a certain age at which that vaccine is usually given? Is it usually once in the bird's life, or is it something that can be given, if members aren't sure if the birds receive the vaccine, can they give it to their bird after they bring it home?
Right. Another good question. There's been a lot of discussion around this. I mean, it's best given in ovo from a hatchery when they can, inject it into the egg before it hatches, because Merrick's is in the environment. The next day is that day of hatch. And so it's a vaccination that can be given if you can kind of get as close to day of hatch, and nothing's perfect, but you're kind of doing your best job. There has been some recent discussions like, well, we don't know it's been vaccinated, but we also don't know it's been exposed if we give that vaccine later. The question is maybe, but we don't really know, right? Because there's so much Merrick's in the environment that it's just hard to know if it's gonna have any effect or not. And so I sat in a meeting probably a year ago where a bunch of veterinarians were kind of talking about that, like, should we still do it? And I think it's just a little bit like no one really knows, because that's kind of past when it's supposed to be given. Because once they've been exposed, they already have it.
Thank you. We do have another couple questions on the infectious diseases. So Lauren and Whitney are wondering if you can remove plaques.
From like ILT and stuff? From like,
I'm guessing they're referring to, like, you've got in this picture here, the plaque in the mouth, if you can or should remove those.
Well, typically at that point, there's a whole lot more going on. That's just kind of part of it, but at that point, it's all through the system. It's in the trachea. You know, it's just throughout, and it's going to be really tricky removing any part of that without causing even more damage. If that makes sense.
Yep. All righty. Thank you. Waylon is wondering if a chicken has like influenza, or I guess any other infectious disease, can it or will it affect the egg if they're laying?
Yeah, I think if I understand the question right, yeah. So if a bird is sick, they're probably not going to lay as much. So I think if I maybe am wondering if the question's asking like, will the egg have influenza or will the bird kind of being hatched is kind of my guess. Well, if it's high path AI, you're going to have a lot of mortality. I don't know AI is vertically transmitted into the egg. I don't think so, but mycoplasma is. So Plorum is, some diseases are and some diseases are not. Now, as far as is it like if you're doing, and so I'm going to just kind of guess on another question, if you're asking like, is it safe to eat the egg if my bird has mycoplasma or if my bird has something? Yes, it's safe. I mean, these aren't diseases we can get. And then, so we're not talking hatching egg now, we're talking food egg. But again, the diseases we can get are Salmonella, Campylobacteria, and E. coli. So you still want to have good egg handling techniques, washing your hands, cooking your egg to temperature to prevent, because those are the diseases that we actually can get from birds. So no, if your flock has mycoplasma and you eat the egg, there's not going to be any harm to you or your family from, like, you're not going to catch mycoplasma. But if it's a hatching egg, that young bird can have mycoplasma.
Gotcha. Thank you
Hopefully
very much for covering all those aspects, because I'm sure that was going to be a lot of follow-up. So thank you. We do have just a couple more if you're up for them before you move on, Heather.
Sure.
So let's see. Katie and Aubrey are wondering, is bumblefoot a disease that can hurt your chicken? Is their question.
Yeah. Like the bumblefoot question. Yeah, John and I are actually just discussing bumblefoot the other day. So bumblefoot has there's different causes on why your bird is going to get bumblefoot. Bumblefoot itself is like usually a staph infection in a wound. So, and that can cause that swollen foot. So it's getting that staph infection because it stepped on something, it injured itself. Maybe its perch is not having a good perch, or when it's flying up there at night and roosting, it's sitting uncomfortably on its pad, so you don't have the right size perches for it. There's some other causes.
If your litter is excessively wet, and they're on it, they actually get ammonia burns, and that'll cause bumblefoot. So really, a lot of that is very preventable. It's making sure that your roosts are nice and smooth. You don't have any sharp objects. Your litter's nice and dry. If you got spots around the waters, a lot of times with the bell waters, they get knocked around, so you end up with these great big wet rings all the time. It's a good idea to just get in there and shovel that out and put some new litter in there. Try not to let that get so wet that you start having leg problems. It's also, it can cause skin problems, and then you start dealing a lot with ammonia. All of a sudden your air quality is going to go down really fast. So it's always good to keep that wet litter out of there.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. I've got two more for you. So Haley is wondering, is it okay to feed chicks medicated food?
Yeah, we actually kind of, it should be a chick medicated food, but yeah, because it helps protect them against like coccidiosis and some of the other stuff that they can get. So we find it to be beneficial. Now, I understand there's some, people are always talking about organic and not. And those are just different beliefs. But, if you're able to and willing to, we do promote using medicated feed for when you're raising it helps just kind of some of the youngs, help them get through some of the issues that young chicks are real susceptible to.
Perfect, thank you. And I will add, you guys, obviously, usually when you're feeding it to chicks, this isn't an issue, but if you are raising market birds for 4-H, okay, you're raising fryers or meat pens, pay attention to your feed and make sure if it is a medicated feed that you're feeding them, that you are watching that withdrawal time, so that by the time that you take them to fair, and they're going to potentially be processed to go onto somebody's plate, there is absolutely no medication left in that system. So that's what your withdrawal times, you guys learn about that in MQA. So especially for those meat birds, watch those withdrawal times.
Good point.
All right, the last one I have for you is Dusty is wondering, for most of these infectious diseases that you listed, can pheasants get them? And can you vaccinate for them and then still release the pheasants if you're doing a program like that?
Well, so the simple answer, well, they can get some of the diseases. So Marek's is real specific to chickens. So your turkeys and your pheasants can't get chicken Marek's, right? So that's turkeys have their own type of Marek's, herpes virus, same with pheasants. So that's not really a worry in pheasants. Pullorum, yes, you can. You can definitely get mycoplasmas. I'd have to look exactly at, there are some diseases that they can happen, but they're not as common. This is why when you guys are raising birds, you should not mix your birds. So you shouldn't have turkeys mixed with chickens, and you shouldn't have waterfowl mixed with your gallinaceous poultry. And that's to kind of, because some birds may not be normally susceptible, but if a whole flock has it and they're exposed, they can get it, right? Because they're still birds. So yeah, there are some diseases that are specific to, pheasants and stuff, but there are some diseases that can be transmitted between groups.
And
yeah.
One other thing is, if you're willing to let us come out and do some testing and join the NPIP program, we do monitor for the pullorum. We can do tests for that. We can do the AII test. We can check for Newcastle. We can do those types of things so that that if you are releasing those birds, they are going to be healthy.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. You've got a lot of thank yous coming in. So thank you for answering those questions so thoroughly. That is all I have for now. So I will hand it back to you.
Okay, well, let me go on to the thing that we all like to talk about, bugs, right? You've been to a fair. This is something probably your 4-H leader has talked to you a lot about and we talked to you about. So lice and mites are super common. They happen in backyard flocks, but this is where prevention comes in. And this is you being good chicken owners, right? So you can prevent this. Your birds don't have to be riddled with lice and mites, but if you're not on top of this, there's a good chance they are going to be riddled with lice and mites. If you prevent it and you're ahead of it, and you'll probably have, and even if you get a small infestation, you're probably able to kind of handle it real quick because you're watching for this all the time. But if you're just spending 6 months and you haven't even picked up a bird and you haven't looked at it and you haven't dusted it and you haven't done anything, and all of a sudden it's like fair time and you realize you have it and you're within 4 weeks of the fair, you're not going to get rid of it. You're going to have problems. And because if you get a bad infestation, it's something that can take 6 months to get kind of control of, because it's a process, because lice and mites both have a hatching cycle, and lice themselves kind of have an impenetrable egg match, on the feathers. And so it's very hard. You're going to do some plucking, which is never good coming fair time, because you want your birds to look really nice and beautiful. So if you've got a lice and mites issue a month out to fair and you're having to pull feathers, you may not have the perfect looking bird that you're looking for. Here's some pictures, you guys. Lice and mites, just so you know, they are very poultry specific. Now, doesn't mean that a mite and lice can't get on us and bite us, but they're not going to stay on us and live on us. We can still kind of get itchy from them, but they're not going to just we aren't the host for them. Now, we have our own lice, as you guys know, being school age kids. You probably have a friend or a brother or sister or someone out there that's had lice, or yourself. Not so much fun, but that's not the same. It's a different species of lice than that's on chickens. If you kind of look at this picture where I kind of got the first yellow circle, you'll see there's almost looks like little white I don't know, it's a like cottony kind of at the base of the feather. Well, that's lice eggs, right? And lice and like mice and like many animals like moist, warm areas like bacteria and viruses. We love that warm, moist areas. That's why we talk about keeping litter clean and dry. So around the vent area of your bird, that's, you know, the cloaca opening, that's a really good spot to look, and you got to get right in there. You got to pick up your bird. You got to look around at the skin, trying to look for things kind of crawling on your bird, looking for these kind of white mats. You got a bearded variety. So you can sometimes just like, even just touching like this, you can kind of feel it crunching because they're drinking. And so the beard's kind of staying moist. So that's another area that lice really like to hang out. Mites, when you're looking for them, especially if you have like a white bird, it's really easy to see them because it kind of looks like little black specks kind of all over the feather. Like they'll actually crawl up the feather. But if you look really close, they're moving. And when they're red, or when you kind of see the dark, that's because they've engorged themselves on blood. So they're actually white until they drink blood, and then they're kind of red. So that's how you can, so that's how they change colors. And they'll crawl on the skin too. So lice can't live off the bird. So if you kind of are treating it and you're kind of pulling the feather, it's not going to live off the bird very long. Mites on the other, so in your coop, mites on the other hand can live in the cracks and crevices in your coop. They can jump off the bird. They can hide out for quite a time. So you might treat your birds, and the mites all jump off, and then the treatment's kind of done, and then they all come back. Like mites can do that. They can live quite a long time in the cracks and crevices in your coop. So when you guys are dealing with lice and mice, a key piece of this is always cleaning your coop as you're treating your birds. We recommend, here's how we kind of check for them when we're at fairs and shows. You'll see us kind of, you know, look right there. We'll drape the bird. We look kind of around that, like, you know, the vent area, because that's a wet, moist area. In the bearded variety there, you can see we kind of feel around in there. And so that's when we're checking for, you know, lice and mites. That's what we're looking for. The treatment is very similar for both of them. You know, I know everyone uses diatomaceous earth, and that's a good supplement, but diatomaceous earth alone isn't probably going to help prevent, and it's probably not going to help get rid of it. It's a good additive to their dust bath, but it's in and of itself, it doesn't kind of going to do a whole lot. It might do a little bit on the prevention side of it, but you're still probably every once in a while need to use poultry specific dust. Make sure whatever you guys are using on your birds is poultry specific. For meat birds, it's a whole different story because you cannot put permethrin on your meat birds because it's a food animal and it's going to be sold for food. So it's not, unfortunately with meat birds, it's just going to be some bathing and just staying ahead of it, you know, making sure you don't have it in the first place when you bring your meat trio in or your meat birds that you're working with. It's all about prevention. And making sure you're bathing your birds pretty regularly and kind of keeping them clean and dry and healthy and kind of, but for your egg birds, like you can use permethrin, and you're gonna, you want to always read the bottle. Whatever's on the bottle is what you want to follow. Because similar to us, lice and mites can develop a resistance to permethrin. So if you overuse it, they can develop a resistance. And it's not really like a shake and bake. You don't want to stick your chicken in a pillowcase and dump a whole bunch of permethrin and like shake it up. That's not what we're going to do. They're not going to like that. You're not going to like that. But just take a little teaspoon under each wing, a little teaspoon kind of in the beard and then around the rump. And that's kind of a treatment. And you'll do that for all your birds. And you definitely want to, if you're taking, you know, you're kind of coming up on fair season, maybe starting here and like kind of when the, you know, birds are coming back and everything, that's probably a good time to start a treatment. So you're ahead of the game when fair season comes and show season. So yep, it's all about prevention. Meat birds, unfortunately, you can't use this on them. It is a chemical and it's not recommended. And like, again, if you get it really bad, you're going to have to clean your coop. I don't know. So I guess I'm going to turn over to John, but I don't know if there's any kind of specific, because I know lice and mites are a big topic at the shows. I don't know if anybody has any specific questions or if you want to keep going on.
Can I just ask a quick question, Kinsey? Sorry.
Absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit about the treatment of lice and mites and the egg withdrawal times? I know we talk about the meat pens there, but I know there are some withdrawal times and some chemicals that are not allowed for use with your egg laying birds.
Right. So permethrin, so there is a website out there. that has all the withdrawal information. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I can get it, and I can definitely make sure that I get that back to you guys when the email with our PowerPoint goes on. I'll make sure that we have that information. I'll have to look up permethrin specifically. I don't want to speak incorrectly about it. I don't know if sometimes the labels might say what the withdrawal is, and it's maybe worth reading the label and to whatever the concentration is. But there are definitely some things you wouldn't want to use, like ivermectin, you know, if you're treating like that, you know, that's an egg layer one where I think the withdrawal time on it's unknown. Now, sometimes a vet might tell you they obviously say, well, never, because we don't know the withdrawal, but they're probably going to say something like wait 4 or 5 months, or 4 or 5 weeks, right? Because they don't really know, or there really isn't one. Just sometimes, but that has to come from your veterinary, you know, what they might recommend, because sometimes there just isn't one, but they need to treat what's happening with your bird. So it really is specific to whatever the item or the, you know, chemical or drug is in question. But I'll look up that website too for because it is public knowledge, so you can look it up. I just can't think what it is off the top of my head. I probably have it on my fast. Yeah, I'll try to get that here before the end of the talk.
Perfect. And worst case scenario, we can send it out with that follow-up email as well.
Oh yeah, it's FARAD. That's what it is. It's if you go to FARAD.org. That's Food Animal Residue Avoidance Database. And that'll cover cattle, pigs, chickens, and you can look up different medication there, and it should have that information.
Perfect. Thank you. I put it in the chat. Hopefully I got it right. FARAD, correct?
Yeah, FARAD.org, and that stands for the Food Animal Residue Avoidance Database. Okay.
Perfect. Thank you. We did have a couple more questions come in. Let's see. Morgan's wondering, do you need to bathe your birds if they don't have lice and mites?
So you don't need to bathe your birds, but you guys will for show, because you want your birds to look nice. Bathing your birds, kind of getting close. A lot of people do it when they get close to show or fair time to get your birds looking nice but like throughout the year, do you need to bathe them? No. Like, you know, if you're providing them adequate dust baths, you know,
clean litter, clean conditions in general.
Yeah, but the reason that we bathe birds is because we're getting ready for show, and we want to go with our nicest bird possible.
All right, thank you. Lacey was wondering, can ducks get any of the things that we've been talking about today?
Yes, they can. They're kind of like pheasants. They can kind of have some of their own diseases. Ducks, waterfowl are actually really good reservoirs for avian influenza. They don't necessarily always affected by it like chickens are. So that's why we kind of never recommend mixing your waterfowl with your chickens, because waterfowl can shed these diseases, but they're not really impacted. So you don't really know that they're sick, because they're not going to be, you know, feeling bad, but they can give it then to your chicken, and then your chicken can get like avian influenza. And sometimes like that's what's happening, is that when they have mixed groups of birds, especially in some of these kind of big, you know, I was thinking bigger flocks, sometimes you can get that crossover. There are other diseases. I don't know if there's a specific question about, but a certain disease, but yes, there are some diseases that they can share. ILT is very specific to chickens.
Okay, perfect. Let's see, I think we got a couple more. We already did that one. Aaliyah's wondering, should we use PPE when dusting poultry?
Yes, great question. Yes, definitely. I think we were going to cover it in biosecurity, but yes, and you should actually probably have your parents do it, because it is a chemical. And luckily we all have masks these days, so you would definitely want to wear a mask. But when you use that mask, you'd want to throw it away when you're done. You're going to want to use gloves, and because you're not going to want to breathe it in. So yeah, definitely use PPE. And we never recommend that a child do the dusting. We always recommend that an adult do the dusting, because it is a chemical. It is permethrin.
All righty. And then Katie and Aubrey are wondering if they have lice or mites, will the eggs be bad if you eat them?
No, the lice and the mites shouldn't impact the eggs. Yeah, no, that doesn't cross over into the egg.
Alrighty, and the last one from Troy is, he's wondering, what's the best litter option, I guess, in your guys' experience?
I've seen an awful lot. Typically, the pine shavings tend to be the best. A lot of times with straws and haze, they tend to grow molds and things. They're not as absorbent. And then also you end up with like wetter litter conditions. You're not going to see them around here, but we've used rice shavings in California. I've heard some say sand at times. I've never tried it, but it would allow water to go down to the bottom and not actually stay on top. You could rake it pretty good, try to keep the manure out of there, try to keep it pretty clean. Typically, I've almost always used pine shavings, but that's
Perfect, thank you. And then I guess last one, sorry, is from Cammie. And Cammie, I thought I was gonna get away from having to say this word because Heather had answered the question earlier, but she was following up for the can you use diatomaceous? Thank you.
Diatomaceous.
Thank you, Cammie. I was super impressed that you could even type that out. Can you use it on meat birds since you can't use the permethrin?
Yeah, and I think there's some food grade diatomaceous earth out there. I don't, there's rule, you have to check your rules around your meat birds, but I always double check your rules for your guidelines. But I believe that that one's okay to use because there's a food grade diatomaceous earth available.
Can you dust with it and lepidate it?
I don't know if I quite caught that. Say that one more time.
The food grade diatomaceous earth, can you dust with it and feed it to them?
Yes, you can do both with diatomaceous earth. So the kind of I don't want to say controversy, it's not. I think it's a good, like I said, I think it's a good helper, but if you do have a lice or mites problem already, that's not going to get rid of it. But it's a good additive to kind of your prevention program.
All right, good question, Cammie. Thank you guys. I think we are good with questions for now. So you guys can keep rolling and I'll keep track of other ones coming in.
All right, I'm going to hand it over to John for biosecurity. Did that go? Maybe I'm sorry. Hang on. I'm on the wrong screen because I had looked that up. There we go.
So here we are. We're actually in the Western Slope. We're going to go in and visit some commercial egg layers. And so this is the type of gear we would do, the full Tyvek suits with gloves, masks, and then Tyvek boots as well. And all of this is again, biosecurity. The best thing that we can do is be preventive. The worst thing is trying to figure out how to fix everything after we've already gone too far. So if you go to the USDA, they've got some exceptional videos, they've got slides, they've got a lot of articles and things around biosecurity, and it's very, very well done. So I would strongly recommend just visiting that. It'll address a lot of the things that we will hear today, and even add quite a bit more.
You can see the website down there. It's in really tiny letters, but it's HTTP, so it's healthybirds.aphis.usda.gov. And I'll say the one thing that what they did is, so they, just to kind of a background on what Defend the Flock was, is they took that, they take all the biosecurity that your commercial producers do, you know, they have a really stringent biosecurity process that they follow, is even like showering in and showering out. Now that's not practical for a backyard flock, but what APHIS decided to do is to try to take those principles and then put them in a format that backyard flocks can follow. So they took the kind of same principles that a commercial flock is going to use, but how can you as a backyard flock owner kind of practice these same things and try to keep your birds safe?
Thank you. So on biosecurity basics, a lot of what you want to do is like with COVID and everything, you're going to be washing your hands before and after. You're going to want to have gear that's just for your chicken barn. You don't want to have stuff that you're going in your barn, then you're going into your house, then you're going everywhere. You want to keep it for that, just so that whatever is there, you keep it there, and then you're also not bringing anything else new in. You want to limit visitors. You never know where they've been. You know, it's always fun to kind of show off what you have, but there's a good chance they have birds or they have something else going on at their place that, you know, for that great hour or whatever that they visit could cost you a lot of pain in the future. So you really want to limit what kind of visitors that you have. If you need to have some visitors, you know, it's strongly recommended to have maybe some disposable boots, maybe some gear that they can wear that's, you know, just specific to your place. Try to keep anything new from coming in. And then also bird contact. You want to be careful of, you know, if you have feeders outside and you just start bringing in a lot of wild birds, you're really asking for some trouble. You know, you get a lot of the sparrows there everywhere. You've got, you know, a lot of other breeds and things like that. You're also actually bringing in mice when you have stuff like that outside. So you want to try to protect that. If you do have an outside pen, you know, you probably want to, if you look down in that lower left corner, you know, those are all enclosed. So you're gonna keep those wild birds from coming in. If you have a much bigger situation, you know, depending on your situation, you may want to consider some netting possibly, if you've got a bigger porch or something like that. But, you know, wild birds is, you know, especially with the avian influenza overseas and migratory birds, it's just, you know, potentially a matter of time before we start running into something. You're going to want to keep, like I said before, you're going to have some boots just for that barn. You don't want to just be going everywhere with the same shoes on. You want to kind of keep it just separated. And then, you know, probably even have a pair of coveralls, just so that, you know, if you're going in, you're just keeping everything there. You're not taking it back home and then, you know, eventually taking that elsewhere. In equipment and things like that, it's best to keep your own equipment. You don't want to, you know, you're small enough. You don't need to worry about like some of these bigger situations where you have to have say a bobcat or something like that. You know, you don't want to be sharing things. You never know, again, what other people are dealing with. One of the biggest things too is like Heather mentioned before, is when you're in your barns, just keep an eye on the birds to see what's happening. You know, a lot of times it doesn't take a whole lot. You're going to see them kind of ruffle up and they're just not looking the same. When you run into something like that, it's a great idea just to maybe take that bird and separate it from the flock. Try to figure out what's going on with it, but don't let it stay there long enough that all of a sudden it's going to start passing on whatever it may have. If it gets really bad, you want to report. You want to probably give us a call or call a vet. If you start seeing, you know, 2, 3, 4 birds, or, you know, all of a sudden, you know, they're starting to die on you and things like that, it's time to start reaching out and then let's see what's going on. And then the other thing that we recommend is, you know, if you're bringing in new birds or you're moving birds, is you want to keep them separated. Give them some time, you know, away from your flock. Make sure you're looking at them, making sure that, you know, you're not noticing anything outstanding, any illness with them. Excuse me.
I was gonna say for you guys too, because your guys kind of 4-H group, some of the equipment that you guys might share might be like a pen or a dog carrier or something that you're bringing to fair. You know, those are the kind of things you don't want to share. Those are the kind of the things you want to just kind of keep with your own flock and stuff, and try to avoid borrowing it from somebody else to take your birds to fair. That would probably be a good example of something that you guys wouldn't want to share.
Great, thank you. So biosecurity is going to help us keep the flock healthy. It's the best way to go is stay ahead of it, not try to fight it after the fact. One of the biggest things we can do is keep everything clean. You know, you want your equipment clean. You want those waterers clean. You know, if we start at the very beginning with the chicks, when you have those waters that are right down on the litter, there's a lot of times within hours they can be, you know, full with shavings and droppings and things like that. You know, you're going to want to clean those at least in the beginning, sometimes 3-4 times a day. And it seems a lot, but if they're all plugged up and just full of litter, it's, you know, they're not getting the water they need, which is super critical. But it's also dirty and contaminated and potentially going to start growing bacteria. You're going to want to keep your feeders clean. You know, a lot of times, again, with the chicks, you've got the feeding trays. You're going to want to keep the droppings out, keep the litter out. Typically, when you know, in the brooding stages, you know, you've got it extra warm. A lot of times that the feed will start losing a lot of its vitamins and nutrients. So you're going to want to like scrape off that top and kind of keep some new feed on top, just to make sure that they're getting what they need. You want clean clothes, again, with some boots, you know, especially if you've got a situation where you've got multiple ages, you're always going to want to hit the youngest ones first. You're going to want to, and with the clean gear. And then when you finish with that, then you can switch to other gear and go check the older birds. But you always want to go youngest to oldest. You always want to go healthiest to sick. You know, if you have sick birds, you want to check them last. You want to make sure you're looking at the healthy birds first. We don't really have it on here, but you know, air quality is huge. You know, if it's getting really dusty and you've got ammonia and things like that, you want that air quality to be top notch. You know, if you're in there and you're uncomfortable, there's no doubt your birds are too. And as Heather said, you know, you want to start keeping, you know, if you got chickens and turkeys, you want to keep them separated. There's a lot of things that the waterfowl, like they tend to harbor avian influenza. You want to keep them separated. You want to keep ages separated. I mean, it gets a little tricky, but it's a best case. You know, the older birds can have a lot of things that the younger birds aren't dealing with. Sometimes the younger birds, you know, if for chance they didn't get vaccinated with Merrick's, you know, maybe they give it to the older birds. So you want to keep your birds separated as much as possible. You want to make sure that you know, if you are buying birds, you're getting them from a reputable source. You know, there's a lot of places that you know, they'll make sure that they're MPIP certified, that they're going through they're checked for palorum, they're checked for things. You know, your larger hatcheries are most certainly going to vaccinate for Merrick's. A lot of times, if you get a little backyard flock, you know, the Merrick's vaccine comes in a 1,000-dose vial, and sometimes it's kind of hard for them to say, yeah, I'm gonna do that for 15 birds. They don't do it. So you know, you want to make sure that you're getting them from a reputable source. Definitely recommend all in, all out. You know, you start mixing, you know, different species or different ages. You're kind of walking a fine line as far as, you know, you're really going to start looking into some trouble eventually. You might get away with it sometimes, but you're really opening yourself up for more troubles. You know, if you see a sick bird, you want to make sure you pull that bird off to the side, get it away from the healthy birds. You know, you can use boxes. You can, you know, there's a lot of different things. You want to make sure that you give them feed and water as well, but you want to move them and you know, may have to go to the garage with them, may have to keep them, but just keep them separated. If you are bringing in new birds, you know, you want to keep them separated as well. Just kind of keep an eye on them, make sure everything seems normal with them. We had somebody bring in a bunch of sick birds, and turns out their spouse picked up an odd bird off the side of the road from somebody, and it had ILT, and so the rest of the birds had it. So you want to make sure that you're very careful of where you're picking up birds. And then, with the fair and shows, you want to make sure that that when you come back, that you keep those show birds separated for a while. You never know, it's not like somebody's out there trying to cause all this trouble, but maybe they just don't know better. Maybe they don't realize their bird's sick. They don't see it soon enough. So you want to make sure that you give your birds enough time to make sure that they're still doing well. Oh, dry throat.
Mm-hmm.
Here's kind of a simple little example of some things that can happen. If you're wearing your same boots and jump in your truck and in your head, and you got to go to the feed store, you got to grab some equipment, you're grabbing some more feed. The feed stores are awesome, but you're not really sure who else is going there. Not everybody's going in there with clean shoes. They're not going in there with clean clothes. They're not going in with clean hands. They're just, there's a lot of potential there. So you want to be careful about, how if you do go to the feed store, you want to practice biosecurity. You want to make sure that you're not using the boots that you're using in your coops. Say you go hit a neighbor farm and they've got some birds. You're picking up another source potentially. So you just really want to be careful about where you go. The next one, you hit an antique store and you pick up a really cool old wheelbarrow. You want to be careful. You don't know where that wheelbarrow's been. And again, you get back. There's back when they had some avian influenza issues, they were finding out that one of the biggest carriers were feed trucks. A feed truck would go to one farm, dump off some feed, and they had a second farm that they hit, and they never washed the tires. Well, they hit that second farm, and boom, everything transferred. Same thing with egg trucks. It's just, if you get any debris, any like mud on your boots and things like that, doesn't matter how much disinfectant you put on it, you're not going to get to that true source. You need to make sure that everything's kept clean. Ultimately, the best case scenario again is just maintain a closed flock. You don't want to be bringing in a lot of extra birds that you're not sure where they're coming from. If you keep it close, you're gonna have the best chances of not dealing with all these other diseases that Heather talked about. You build quarantine areas if you do, or you are bringing in extra birds, you separate those. You just make sure you watch them for a little while. Make sure that you're not dealing with anything. If they start looking sick, then you did the right thing. You didn't infect your whole flock right away. Using flock specific clothing and shoes, again, just kind of beat that like crazy. And then another thing is you can have some foot baths outside your coops, where you can kind of, if you come out, you can wash your boots before you go in. You can wash your boots. The thing with that is you also want to make sure that those are kept clean. You don't want those building up with tons of mud and litter and things like that. And as Heather said, one of the biggest things is birds are heavy carriers of salmonella, and really would mess you up. It's I've had a couple people that have had pleurum, and it's just it's a tough go. So we definitely don't want to be kissing the birds. I mean, petting is absolutely, it's probably even necessary.
I always hate to. I always hate to and love to share the history behind the duck in the sink there, but that is our veterinary director, Dr. Chrissy Pabloni's mom, who has her tucked in, which makes it even more special. And I know it's great to bathe them in your sink, but just so you know, like when you're doing that, you know, that's in your kitchen, that's around your food, there's risk. There's just risk there when you bathe it. So even our good doctor, who's our avian veterinarian, sometimes even her mom breaks the rules.
So you really want to, again, if you're going to a show, is you want to make sure that you're taking healthy birds. You know, it's just not fair to potentially contaminate or spread, you know, with other people that are trying to do the right thing. We need to be responsible. So before you do a show, you want to make sure that, again, you're listening. You're making sure that there's no cough, no snick, no, you know, unusual noises, some wet cough. You want to open their mouth. Just, you know, check in there. Make sure that they look good and clean. You want to make sure that you're not bringing any lice or mites. You know, if you had issues with lice and mites, you know, again, 4 weeks is not enough time. You're gonna need to, you know, address that much sooner. And then, you know, wash your birds. Just make sure that they're good and clean and you know, they look the best for you. But let's be responsible. And if at any point that you feel like there's anything even close, it's always best just to leave them home. Take some different birds, or if you even feel like, you know, potentially your flocks may be compromised, then it's best to probably wait and not do that show. Maybe make sure that everything's good and healthy before you try to take anything out there.
Yes, I just wanted to just comment on this slide real quick before we kind of dive into it. The reason we have this kind of after show event, because a lot of times we talk about prevention, getting ready for a show, like all the things you need to do to get ready, but then like the show happens and then you go home and then you throw your birds right back in the coop. And so I think there's this, you know, you're tired, you've had a long day, but there's this, you know, there needs to be a little bit of things that you guys are thinking about after the show. Because remember, now you've gone to a place and all these birds have been sitting in a room together overnight, sometimes a couple days, right? And they're kind of breathing the same air, you know, they're doing the same thing. You know, when we talk about lice and mites, a lot of people come like, I came home from a show and I got lice and mites. Well, that's true, you might. But if you come home and you dust right away and you treat your birds, they haven't established on your bird yet. So you're not going to bring the infestation back, but you got to keep them quarantined, right? If you just bring them back and throw them into your flock, sure, you definitely could bring it back into your flock. But if you quarantine your birds, treat your birds, do all the things you need to do, and then put them in, that's kind of what this slide was really about. And plus, we're all wearing masks this day, so why shouldn't a chicken?
I don't know, can you find us?
Yeah, right? Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. So what to do with sick birds? Again, you know, if there's, you know, quite a few, you probably want to call a vet or give us a call. Let's try to get it down and see what's going on. You want to make sure that if you have them, you separate them. You know, we'll say that a lot of times, but that's the best way to go. So we have the avian hotline. If you give us a call, you know, we can try to work through some different scenarios. We can try to recommend, you know, maybe a vet if you don't have one, or, you know, if there's a death, then probably bring it into us. Again, that's the best way for us to find out what's happening with the bird. We always want to be super diligent and do it as soon as possible. The longer that, you know, sick birds are kept with the rest of the flock, the more chances of that spreading and really causing some serious havoc. Again, you isolate the bird, you know, put it in a different area. Just keep watching it. Try to document, you know, what's happening with the different stages. You know, is it getting worse? Is it getting better? You know, it started off, it was just kind of ruffled feathers, but then all of a sudden it started to snick, and then it did this. You know, if you know, in the Merrick situation, you're going to start seeing some leg splaying. So you just want to try to keep an eye on what's happening through the few days of the initial call. So you are definitely the best protection your birds have. It's always prevention is always the best way to go. You know, all the things that were talked about in the very beginning are totally preventable. It does take some work, and it does, you know, it's not as convenient. It's not as much fun. You know, it's always fun to show friends, you know, what you have. But we want to be careful. So here's our contact info. The Avian Health Hotline is 970-297-4008. And that'll come directly to Heather's office. And then we are also emailed if you know, we're not happen to be in the office. So we do get those calls, and we monitor that very closely. I also have some Heather's contact info and my contact info. If there's any future questions, don't hesitate to call or ask. We'd love to help.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, you guys probably heard a lot of things repeated a bunch of times because that's how strongly we feel about them. So.
You know, if you ever see a commercial, they always have the phone number like 50 times, and you're like, I got it already. It is important.
Perfect. Well, thank you guys. We do have a couple questions, and if our kids have other questions, you guys can put them in the chat or unmute. So I'll go over if Heather and John, are you guys ready for a few questions?
Sure.
Perfect. And just as a reminder, everybody, even you're welcome to write this phone number and email down, but they will come out in the slides as well that I'll send you guys tomorrow. So that'll be coming out to you. So I missed a question at the very beginning from, I can't remember who it was from. Let's see here. Let me scroll. We're so close. Let's see. Julia's question is it normal for your older chickens to get black dots on their combs?
It can be, because there's different things that can cause it. Sometimes, you know, birds tend to pick at each other. So sometimes they're old scars and wounds, you know, that can cause it. So yeah, sometimes if they've been around a while, or maybe if they're kind of low on the totem pole, they might be getting picked at a little bit more. That's one reason we can see kind of the black specks on the comb. Sometimes temperatures, like you can get frostbite, or they can get, they can cause some damage. It can cause some discoloration. That's another reason that you can kind of get some different colored combs. Certain circumstances could be illness, but if your birds are healthy and it's just looking more like age, it could be related to kind of one of those things.
Right. Perfect. Thank you. Waylon had a question, and I'm guessing this is a breed specific question. If you guys haven't noticed, poultry is not my specialty, which is why I bring in the experts, because it's not my specialty. So Waylon's question is, do red stars have a special disease?
You know, there are some species out there that we see are more susceptible to certain things. Like sometimes silkies tend to be like more susceptible to like lice and mites, whereas like your modern games are a more tight feathered, smaller bird. We don't tend to see that as much on them. Your kind of fluffier bearded breeds. But as far as diseases go, no, unfortunately diseases aren't specific to like different breeds of chickens. It really just kind of impacts chickens, or, you know, a gallinaceous poultry as a whole.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Heather. Oh, I thought I saw a hand up. Did somebody, Savannah? Savannah's from my county. Did you have a question, Savannah? Maybe. If you guys have questions, you can unmute. It looks like we are through the questions in the chat so far, so I will keep looking at those for the next couple minutes, you guys. But while we're waiting for those, I am going to launch a poll for my kids that are watching today. It's literally like 3 quick questions where you click a button and let me know what you thought of this workshop, if you learned something today. in extension, we like to make sure that the things we're doing are actually doing what we're hoping, which is teaching you guys, and that you guys are finding them useful, so that we don't put energy into things that you guys don't respond to. So I am going to launch that poll. If you guys can just answer those 3 quick questions for me. But while we're doing that, please, any last questions for Heather or John? Feel free to unmute or put them in the chat for us. I will fill space. I always give my little spiel here at the end of all my vet chats. If you guys have been on them with me in the past, the biggest takeaway for all of these vet chats, whenever we're talking about any of our animals, you guys, is it's very important to have a relationship with a vet in your area, or even a poultry leader in your area. So obviously having a relationship with a vet helps you to be able to have that relationship to where they know what your animals, your situation looks like, and they can recommend the best care for your animals. Obviously with our poultries, they don't make it to the vet quite as often as some of our larger livestock. And so we don't see as many poultry specialists or poultry serving vets. So another great option is to really be in contact with poultry leaders in your county. So if you don't know who you've got for poultry resources in your county, reach out to your extension agents and they can connect you guys, because a lot of time those poultry leaders are longtime poultry producers, so they've seen a lot of stuff, and they can kind of help direct you to resources. And then of course, CSU with the poultry diagnostics here with their help hotline is another phenomenal resource that we have available to us. So make sure that you've got those connections, or find those connections, and then you guys will have a really successful and hopefully healthy poultry project this year, or fowl project. So with that, you guys, I'm going to go ahead and end this poll. Any last minute questions, you guys, before we let Heather and John go?
Well, we really enjoyed talking to you, and I am hopeful that this year we have a fair season, that we get to see you guys out there, that you guys are going to see us, and even if hopefully you guys will see our faces and know who we are and not be afraid to come talk to us. I always love fair season. It's one of my favorite times of the year. I get lucky because I get to go to 9 of them and the state fair. So I get to travel to quite a bit of fairs. And while I can't be at all of them, it is something we look forward to, working with your groups. And so if you have any questions, please email us, call us. We want to help. We'll connect you to vets. Maybe we know of a vet in your area. We're also a veterinary clinic. We've got the vet teaching hospital right here. So we got a lot of resources.
Well, John, Heather, thank you guys so much for taking the time to prepare this for us and taking the time out of your day to present to our kids. We might have one question pull in here before I let you go. So I've got a question from Brenda. Can you possibly discuss vent gleet symptoms and causes?
I didn't hear the word vent.
Vent gleet, G-L-E-E-T. Again, not my. Andrea, help me if you can. I'm looking at, she's my fellow 4-H agent, and she's the one in the state. I'm butchering stuff.
Describe it for me. Maybe I can answer it.
Usually vent gleet, you're usually seeing diarrhea, matting around the vent area. There's a lot in the Facebook world, a lot of talk about vent gleet anytime they just have a messy butt. A lot of times they're putting it in with being egg bound.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, I did. Yeah. It's probably that terminology. So yeah, there's a bunch of different things that can cause it. So sometimes it's diet. So what I know about backyard flocks, and it's a good thing, but sometimes we like to overtreat our birds, meaning we give them too many treats. So a lot of the feeds that are out there right now are, especially a high quality layer feed, that's pretty much all your bird actually needs it has all the nutrients. So what happens if we sometimes give our birds too many of certain treats and stuff, they're gonna like feast on that because they're like us, we want to eat the candy bars, we don't really want to eat the salad, right? And so birds are the same way. So if we give them too many treats, they're not going to eat enough of their diet. And so sometimes that can cause some diarrhea, some pasting, some, issues. You're right. Sometimes we can get birds that have, they may, and the reasons for egg binding can be different. It can be feed, it can be calcium levels. It also can be, there are some diseases like IBV that can actually cause harm to the reproductive tract, that can make it so a bird that's been exposed to it, it may not be able to lay an egg. It can be nutrition. I think of some of the other causes for egg bound. Yeah, old birds, sometimes they kind of have those issues. And so yes, that can also be something that you're seeing, that kind of dirty vent, dirty kind of caking happening there. And so sometimes it's trying to get at why it's happening is a good way. Sometimes when you have egg bound birds, I know that there are a lot of things out there on the internet of things you can try. We will say from a veterinary standpoint, we can't promote any of that because all of that is invasive in a bird and can cause more harm than good. So we would say take it to a veterinarian clinic and have them treat it. We can't like stand behind some of the stuff that kind of Facebook and all the poultry things because we are a veterinary service. And it is something, there are different ways you can try to massage and stuff, but if you kind of break an egg in an abdomen, you can cause that bird quite a bit of harm. And sometimes there's not much you can do either way. And we understand veterinary care on your chicken that maybe costs $3 is sometimes a very difficult decision to make. I don't know if that answers the question, but there are different things that can lead to that. And sometimes trying to figure out maybe the cause can also kind of help.
Maybe also just making sure that there isn't like some coccidiosis or some sort of enteric issue going on that's causing the diarrhea. Start with that. One thing I didn't bring up before is, some like to do chicken scratch, and everything that I've ever known is the last thing you want to do is to really get them in there rooting through the litter, going after stuff. You want to make sure that they're eating out of the clean feeders and not off the floor. And so I'm just throwing out some ideas. I'm not saying anything that way, but if your litter's exceptionally damp or wet, that a lot of times can start giving you some enteric issues. It might be a sign of coccidiosis again. Might want to do some medicated feed, but I would definitely want to check with a vet. If it's just one bird, sometimes it's just a kind of a genetic thing. Sometimes they just don't operate as well as they should all the time. If it's throughout the flock, then I would start, maybe want to check with the veterinarian.
All right. Thank you guys. And Brenda says thank you. She said maybe I'm treating them too well. So it sounds like you gave her some good ideas to troubleshoot there. So with that, you guys, once again, Heather, John, thank you very much. There's a lot of thank yous coming in through the chat. We had great participation today. So thank you to all my 4-H families that hopped on with us this afternoon. I hope everybody has a great rest of your evening. Again, you should get an email from me to the email you registered with the slides from our presenters today. So we'll make sure you guys get those. And so thanks for joining us. Heather, John, thank you very much for donating your time and your expertise. It was wonderful to have you.
Great. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you so much. Thank you.
All right.